You're listening to Make Planning Make Sense. My name is Aaron Zimmerman, and I'm Director at Centro Planning Consultancy.
And I'm Alex Roth, a planner at Centro Planning Consultancy, and we'll be your hosts.
Today we're talking with Ollie Sargent, the Strategic Director for the Built Environment at Cartwright. The conversation covers a wide range of things that are under Ollie's purview and then also in the planning world. So we talk public engagement, we talk plan making and democracy, and we talk local politics and national politics actually as well. And I think that the thing that really stood out to me was early democratic engagement and the way that that not only shapes planning outcomes, but also strategic issues like housing delivery. And when we say early engagement, we're talking early. We're talking legislation, right? We're talking plan making.
Yeah, I had two main takeaways here. So one is we need to be very honest with public consultation participants about what room there is for engagement and what scope there is for changing the proposal at the planning application stage. And the second takeaway I have is, much to your point, Aaron, because everything is already set out at the time that it reaches the planning application stage, I think we need to get people passionate about engaging at the strategic level, where there is still the opportunity to influence change on things that we then expect at the planning application stage, where we don't have the opportunity to change them.
And true to form, we try to offer some solutions for how this sort of rut can actually be changed.
Yeah. Often you do public consultations and people are already discouraged because they think, what room do I have to contribute anything to this scheme? But I think making really clear to people where there is still room to shape something, being proactive about generating ideas is something where there's really room for engaging people.
Yeah. And in the spirit of public consultation, we're really keen to hear from our listeners on what they would want to see in their next local plan, wherever they live. And remember that once we get to 150 followers on Spotify, we will be having our first questions and answers episode. So while you're writing in about the things that you'd like to see in your next local plan, feel free to add a question or two at the end, and we might be able to discuss it on the show. And a huge thank you to everybody who's listening so far, who's just joined. It's been really incredible. And we are so grateful that we are actually halfway to our goal of 150 followers on Spotify. So please keep tuning in, keep talking about the podcast with your friends or your colleagues or anybody who you think might be interested, because we're really happy about the ways that this is continuing to evolve into a conversation and a larger community. Thanks again.
As always, our email is podcast@centroplan.co.uk.
And with that, I think let's dive in. Ollie Sargent, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me both.
Welcome to our podcast studio.
That's lovely.
We're really excited to talk to you today, and we've worked together on a couple of projects. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can start with just a bit of an introduction about your role, about Cartwright, and what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So we're a full-encompassing agency, really, that covers marketing, digital, planning, comms as well. And I think for me, getting into this role, it's I've always had an interest in property, really, from a very young age. I've been surrounded by it from family and with family friends as well, from all different aspects.
Just like land, Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the other element is the political and current affairs. And that for me was always a big thing and something that I was always very, very interested in. And it started at uni. And I think the last 10 years in terms of current affairs and politics, I think everybody could agree have been interesting no matter where you sit on that political agenda. So I think for me, the planning comms element encompasses all of that. And that's kind of why I wanted to kind of have a career in planning comms. But now at Cartwright, it's a lot broader than just planning comms. And it's kind of meant that my skill set has gone far beyond that. And we now work with planning consultancies, architects. So you almost have to become a bit of an expert in different fields. Yeah. As planners, we're always saying we have to be sort of a master of all / none, because we're going from a noise impact assessment to an affordable housing statement to, yada, yada, yada. And the public discussion and the political element of planning is very timely. And everybody keeps saying that is like a really somber thing, like, oh, well, it's in the news now. It is.
We've got some traction.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's start out with just the intersection of politics and planning, right? Politics, capital P and lowercase p, can have a negative connotation, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Generally, like enfranchisement of local communities, people having a voice in what goes on in development in their local community, and it can be a good thing, right? So throughout your career, how have you observed sort of maybe politics getting in the way?
Is democracy bad? Yes or no?
It's a good, valid question. I've seen it, and I'm sure you guys are the same. We've been sitting in planning committee meetings and we've got our kind of head in our hands sometimes, because it's a two-part thing, in my opinion. I think it goes back to a lack of training, and then in the background there's that political element. If I start with the training element, I think that if you take your normal councillor who has been elected to represent the community, and I was talking to a councillor just the other day on a project, and he kind of admitted, he was like, you do understand what we do isn't a very glamorous job. And I would say it's very, very fair, but they tend to be very normal people. So trying to understand the planning and development space is challenging. And me sitting here as well, I wouldn't say I 100% know everything that's being submitted into an application. So to then ask a councillor on something that is so complex and something that people within this industry spend decades learning is challenging. And the government realise that, because they're putting time and policy together to make sure that there's better training in place, which I think is a good starting point.
I think we've probably all been in committee meetings as well, where the council or the legal advisor for the councillors kind of has to like tug the sleeve of the chair and be like, well, actually, you can't say that. But we've talked before on the podcast as well that there's also an incentive structure question, because the councillor may still know full well that what their vote is going to be informed by isn't part of the development plan or a relevant material consideration. But that's not where their bread is buttered, right? Yeah. Their goal is to serve the community, and their incentives are to be re-elected. There have been some really wild planning committees that we've been in, not in like an entertaining way if you're not into the profession, but just some of the things that are said, and this one was just kind of funny because it was a bit cartoonish, but we were at a committee in an outer London borough, and one of the councillors was saying, well, I don't know what Mayor Sadiq Khan is doing over in London. And I was like, look at the seal up of the dais, like... But it's political, right? That councillor knows full well that it's a London borough and that the London plan is part of the development plan there. But does it matter?
Yeah.
On that day-to-day level.
And that in itself is the issue. I think the councillors have got not a full eye on the actual application. They've got half an eye on the ballot box in the next re-election. Because it comes around so quickly, these election cycles. And unfortunately, and I don't want to get too political, but it comes back to the point that the people that tend to elect councillors, it will be a few hundred people that actually will turn out and elect the councillors, and it tends to be certain demographics, it tends to be people from certain backgrounds, which again leads to the fact that they're thinking, if I'm going to get re-elected, I need to represent that section of society.
When you say certain demographic, you mean the exact kind of people who would mobilise to object en masse to a planning application?
Exactly, yeah. It will tend to be homeowners, it tends to be the older generation, and as you said, it's the people that will be shouting loudest at a planning committee meeting, it's the people that will be shouting loudest in a community hall. So for me, there's those kind of two elements there of the training and the politics, really. I think it's a shame because a lot of what we're trying to do is look at the future generation, and for young people, I think really the system is failing them. I think one of your guests previously have said that, but the way it's set up at the minute, it's politicised, and it's politicised to favour the wrong people. It needs to be more balanced.
Yeah.
And what would you say makes a planning decision political? Are there some that become more political than others in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on a number of schemes where even though it's fully policy compliant, they still will find holes and issues with it. And it's not to say that they shouldn't, because they should always challenge, and it's good to hold people to account, as in officers, that should happen. But quite clearly, they need the confidence when they're making these decisions. And if they're only hearing from a certain faction of society, then they haven't got the confidence to make that decision.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good moment to say as well, public engagement is a good and important part of the process.
100%. Yeah.
You know, I want to go through an episode without mentioning Jane Jacobs, but she came to fame challenging Robert Moses and his freeway construction through Greenwich Village in Manhattan. So
I'm keeping score. It's like once per episode, I think.
And we have the benefit of hindsight. In that case, it was the right thing for Manhattan and for Greenwich Village and for placemaking and sustainable cities that particular freeway was not built. So there is definitely a benefit to it.
Well, I just think it's interesting to unpack that interplay between the technical and the political. What would you say is like the percentage of political and technical? And are there certain applications where you would say it's more political than technical? Like, how do those factor in?
I mean, I actually saw a stat. We do research ourselves, but in some authorities, 30% of an officer's recommendation gets overturned. And I think the big thing is that we're obviously trying to build new homes, and it's another added layer to all of this that causes delays to getting spades in the ground, really. But I think in terms of the technical element, I think there is still a lot of delay, essentially. I wouldn't say always, but it tends to go through on appeal with members, but it's just that delay it adds to the process. And that's kind of why I think it needs to be looked at closer, to almost depoliticize that process slightly. And the government, again, realise that because they're consulting on a tier A, tier B system where the applications that are kind of more controversial go to committee. And that's where the value is, I think, in a planning committee, is when there is material considerations that potentially aren't policy compliant. That's where I think the planning committee makeup makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a hot take here.
Yeah.
All right. Forgive me a hot take. Actually, no, write in podcast@centralplan.co.uk. It should not be it should not be a local democratic process based on the say only of people who live there already.
Agreed.
And if we go super high level with this concept, right? In the 1947 Planning Act.
I thought you were going to say Jane Jacobs again.
In the 1947 Act, the government said, we are assuming the right to develop, right? That is ours now. And now if you want to develop anything, you need our permission, because we are recognizing the importance of a coordinated approach to development for the public good. And in this case, there's all sorts of ways to define a government or democracy, but in this case, the government is not simply an aggregate. It's more of like a social contract situation where the government is distinct from the local community. And they're saying, this is our right to do this. And the reason for that is when you ask a local community about the change that they want, in the aggregate, you're going to fail to deliver things that you need as a society.
Yeah. Dare I say, just because something is locally popular doesn't mean that it necessarily serves the public good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right?
Right. Or, I mean, please disagree with me if you think I'm wrong, but yeah. I don't know. Have you seen any instances of that in your career?
Of what?
in your
I think,
day-to-day, have you come across any examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, and this is an example where something actually wasn't particularly policy compliant, and it was for a supermarket, and it was one that the community wanted. We showed that the community wanted it, and technically there was a few issues, but obviously we're on this one side of the fence and the local authorities on the other side of the fence, but we clearly showed that there was support, and we had hundreds of support letters, but it didn't mean much.
There's this tension that it is a technical and professional exercise informed by the strategic needs of a community or a society, and you get to the end of the process and there's sort of this wild card gauntlet that you have to clear. And I think that that's one of the things that, again, I think government's trying to put some guardrails on. How do we get more people involved? So you talked about youth engagement, which is what kind of jogged this.
Yeah.
And we also talked about this certain kind of demographic that will show up as an organized group at a planning committee meeting. How do we get that youth engagement in that committee chamber?
To us, it might seem simple, but to people that aren't involved within this industry, it's a complicated process. Yeah. I mean, if I ask a handful of my friends, not saying that I'm young anymore either, but if I asked a handful of my friends how would you go about writing to the council about an application, or how would you get involved, they wouldn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
If we're being completely honest, as an industry, we're still not doing a good job of that. Youth engagement, as I said, the homes that we're trying to get planning for tend to be for the end user. So it's kind of your young families, people that are renting.
Yeah, the people who don't live there yet.
Exactly. And it's, as you say, how do we reach those people? I think social media has been a great element because we've certainly seen an uplift in terms of advertising and consultation through social media. You get a wide-ranging demographic, as in a younger audience. But I think we almost need to be slightly more aggressive and have a bit more of a rethink about the tactics to reach a younger audience. Because they are underrepresented, they also tend to be very, very time poor people. They've got young families, very, very busy lives. And I've done it in the past and it's worked well where we've gone to almost festivals. We did it once in kind of a street party in Islington. And the demographic and the people you get see very different and they appreciate it.
Yeah.
They won't probably pick up a leaflet that's found in the letterbox or various other ways. So I think in terms of the approach to youth engagement, I think we need to be going to them more. And I think whether that's being in shopping centres or going to schools or colleges, we need to think bigger and make that approach.
What's your sense of where the expectations and where the bar is set at the moment? So going down into that kind of case by case for a specific development project.
There really isn't much policy on it. I'd be interested actually from your take in terms of when you're having the conversation with officers, what do they say to you about public engagement really? What do they kind of set out as must-dos requirements or is it pretty fluid?
I would say more than anything, what we hear is that they don't want it to just be a tick box.
Yeah.
But that's different than saying what they do want.
Yeah.
But it is case by case, right? I think that's what I would say we hear from LPAs is that it depends on the LPA.
I think that's potentially an issue in itself is that it is very different from every local authority you deal with. There is no set rules, there is no set approach, and every community is different. I'm not kind of sitting here preaching that we need set rules. If it's a 200 home scheme, you need to do X, Y, Z. This is how you should engage.
Yeah.
But
it'd be so arbitrary, right?
yeah. But there needs to be better guidance because some developers, being honest, are very good at it and some developers not so much. And again, for a developer, it's another cost, let's be honest. But this will sound cliche, but the more engagement you do, the better a scheme tends to be.
Yeah. You know, the purpose of this is to inform the actual sort of outcomes of the development as a lived experience.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the teenager who says, well, this public realm is nice, but we would really like some benches along this so we can hang out with our friends, but like not right outside the window of like our family's houses, you know, and just have a little bit of like their own space. Or the lighting on this pathway is going to be really important to me because I don't feel safe walking through this public space without that after dark. And again, that goes back into youth engagement especially. But the question of how to shape that conversation with the public is kind of a timings question as well, as you're alluding to. Where should this public engagement start? Where is that starting point and what are the kind of guardrails to what that discussion should involve?
I think at the minute, public engagement is always too late. I think it needs to be embedded into the process a lot earlier on. We've got to be honest with the public as well in the fact that certain things aren't up for debate and it's a bit of an education element around things like viability, infrastructure needs. So I think we need to be honest with the public from an early outset when there is decisions that they can impact. When that is, I would always say earlier, the better. But at the minute, I think in too many cases, we are going to the community and we're asking for their opinion and really not a lot can change.
Some banners and like, what do you think? But you don't want to put the banners up and print them until you've got these nice CGIs. And at that point, you're like, well, I'm not going to change the building footprint.
Exactly. And I think that leads to issues with what people think of developers, planners, and the whole system really, because again, I saw a stat the other day, I think it's something like 60% of people feel like the consultations are too late and that they can't actually influence anything that's happening. So if that belief is out there, then people are just automatically very disenfranchised from the whole process and just won't get involved. We kind of need to take a step back And I've worked on more kind of strategic land sites as well.
Yeah.
And more opportunities for feedback happen naturally because you have to take them along this long journey.
Like the primary school charrettes where you've got these like little tables with the crayons and
Yeah. But the other element of all of this is it's not just the private and thinking about the developers that are looking to build homes. You've also got to look at the councils, the local plan process. I've never, ever been involved or feel like I've been consulted on a local plan process. And that's where development...
Roll up your sleeves, bro. You got to get involved.
But that is where development's earmarked during that process. And residents and people, the public, don't know that. So there's a duty that shouldn't just be on the developers to consult, but also time and energy needs to go into that local plan process.
Yeah. And all of that costs time and money, you know.
But I mean, that's something that I'm quite passionate about, is that really, if you're going to fix the planning system, in my opinion, is that investment has to go into local authorities. The planning officer's role, I don't envy them. I'm sure you guys are the same, is that they've got such a challenge on their hands.
Yeah.
They're time poor. They've got so many applications to review.
We'll be right back.
Do you comment on planning applications as a private citizen?
I don't, and I
Busted.
It's true though. Probably because they're not doing a good enough job. They need a better planning comms agency.
You never even got the letter.
But I do feel like I have to, because there's a load of development. I live kind of in between Lewisham and Greenwich, and there's a load of development happening around there. And given my background, I'm very pro-development and want to see regeneration. But sometimes I feel like that I've not received something that I should have received, which again is an issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Alex, do you write consultation responses?
Do you know, I keep up with them. I keep up with the planning applications in my neighborhood and my borough of Hackney. There aren't actually that many, so it's easy. No, no.
Take note.
I haven't actually, but maybe I should.
It's a little bit fun for me. So I do, right?
Yeah.
Humble brag, I'm a nerd. But it's easy for me because I'm in Whitechapel. So it's just like strategic application after strategic application. And I just like write in, I'm like, love this one too.
Do you get really technical?
Do I get technical? Sort of, but only to the point that I'm being clear about why I don't think things that would likely be contentious are concerns for me. And then I try to sketch out quickly some of the public benefits that weigh really heavily in favor of the scheme. And the reason for that is that an objection letter is going to go into detail about everything that they just absolutely can't stand. And so I don't want the letter of support to just be this like, I like it. You know, I want it to actually be material as well.
I guess it can also be, I mean, to that point, you're a planner writing a letter to the local authority, right?
The office is supposed to be like this guy.
And you know what to look for. You know, do you think it would be discouraging to a non-planner to know that perhaps, you know, if I don't know the exact right planning considerations to point out in my letter of objection or letter of support, then how much impact is it really going to have?
Right, however you feel about it. I don't think that is the barrier, at least to my mind. I think it's knowing how to get to the public database and registering, and then how to navigate the database, which is super arcane and like very, very quick to be like, oh, you entered the wrong thing and I have no idea what you meant and I'm just going to say no results. So you have to know how to use just the interface. And that's probably a bigger barrier. But also time, like you say, you know, younger people.
Yeah, it's time.
We're busy people.
We are.
Like the hustle is real. Yeah. Houses are expensive. So that's something that I don't think that planning can solve, right? You can have the most robust public engagement strategy and millennials are still going to be busy.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about neighbor engagement and the kinds of things that come up consistently, what are people passionate about across, you know, multiple consultations, multiple sites?
I think what people want to see is that even if they don't want housing, they want to know what the benefit is for them. So you tend to see it could be a doctor's surgery, or they want to know that if we're delivering these homes that they don't want, potentially, that there is going to be some benefit for them. And again, it goes back to how we frame it. And I think it's so important that the developers aren't the bad guys in this situation.
Yeah.
They have to deliver a certain amount of homes to be able to deliver your doctor's surgery, your schools. They're building a lot of this infrastructure that is benefiting the community, really. So, yeah.
How do you convey some of those more macro level benefits to the public? So, for example, housing delivery, that particular site may only be delivering 200 homes, but on aggregate, if we do that across multiple sites across the borough, that could be very significant.
I mean, our role within it all is to really get down to make sure that what we're putting out is in plain English. Everything that, if you read a planning application, as I kind of touched on earlier, it's complicated stuff. And as I said, it's stuff that I wouldn't 100% be confident saying that I fully understand. So for us, it's making sure it's all stripped.
Making sure it's legible to a layperson, right? Plain English, plain language in any language, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's very, very important. And we've got to be honest in terms of what the trade-offs are. That's the big thing, because I think as soon as residents don't feel like you're being truthful and honest with them, they'll switch off and will go the other way and will object to what you're...
Greasy developer. That kind of
exactly.
thing.
And we have to be as transparent as we can be.
I want to go back to this idea about the what's in it for me mindset, because that sounds like a little bit wheeler dealer, quid pro quo. But I think it also might suggest a concern about the community resources that are currently already stretched, right? It's saying, well, our GP waiting times are already 3 weeks for anything.
Yeah.
Or our schools are already, or our leisure center is already, ... And it wasn't the case until very recently. It wasn't the developer who's responsible for building schools or the community center. The state was responsible for those things.
Yeah.
And Sarah made this really good point last week that if you rely on public services to be provided piecemeal by speculative development, you're ignoring the fact that the services aren't necessarily up to the standard that they should be now. And so there's this sort of scarcity, right? Ezra Klein, we'd love to have you, by the way. But there's a scarcity that exists now that I think makes people protective of what little sort of public service they have.
Yeah, no, I would
discuss.
No, I would completely agree. And I think we need to enable the fact that developers are bringing this infrastructure forward. And I don't think the people understand that, essentially. And they are the enabler for everything that comes with it in terms of better roads, better doctors' surgeries, better infrastructure just generally. Yeah. So it's this education piece. Developers are notoriously one of the least trusted people. I mean, there's surveys out there. I think it was something like 22% of people trust developers, which is such a small margin. They do get such a bad rep. Again, we need to take everybody on that journey and explain exactly what developers can bring to a scheme.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's so many policies and so many hoops that you have to jump through that it blocks creativity of design?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there's no room for much else if you pile on so much policy and so many requirements, and there's just not that much room for anything else in terms of budget and also in terms of the design itself, right?
Yeah.
There's an issue that we could get to the point where we are kind of almost cookie cutting designs, and it's repeated a little bit. Controversial.
Could get to the point.
I have thoughts on this. I think I'm
are we already?
Rant alert. Rant alert.
Are we already at that point?
We are. Because there's these simultaneous conversations going on. Like on one hand, you've got, I just hate the sameness of modern development. Everything looks the same. Everything's so placeless. But tell me if Victorian Terrace looks that different in Manchester versus London, right? And then when you try to deviate from the development plan, you're going to get, pushback.
Yeah.
But when you accord with the development plan, guess what it's going to look like? Everything else. They all look the same, but if you're in Hackney Wick, you put slants on the roof so it echoes the industrial touch of the arrow. Like, pick a lane.
Yeah.
Right? Do you want everything to be as close to policy compliant as possible? Or do you want individuality? Well, that might mean that the windows are going to be large enough that it gets hot in that flat in the summer.
Yeah.
Or like, maybe somebody would really love to live here and doesn't mind not having a balcony. And it's better for the public interest to have that flat at all.
I think the tough question we also have to ask with that is, even if we didn't do all that stuff, would it still result in a really high quality accommodation?
Yeah. I think that there is a mistrust for applicants to want to do it right. There is a floor to that as well. You know what I mean?
I saw a stat that 72% of people want influence in terms of designing their future home. And we are potentially, I keep using that word potentially, but we're going down that road where if we are producing the same designs over and over again, is that really what people want to live in? And this is people's biggest purchase in life. And the fact that we are dictating the design and it's very rigid, I think is an issue, because we are potentially creating homes that, and I know there's loads of caveats to this, but we're creating homes which people almost have to full force to live in.
But how do you, I guess this is also a public engagement question, how do you get people passionate about getting into more of the creator role, into the creative role, and not just the critical commentator role, but really like the more of a co-designer role in like suggesting actually like proactive solutions, and instead of just commentary or critique?
They need to start by feeling like they can actually do that.
I mean, if that's even what we should be doing, but even with certain interactions that you have with officers, you just get the sense the process would benefit from them getting a little more involved into the proactive, creative role.
You know, be an urban designer with us, be a planner with us. And one of the things that we try to do as agents, as best as we can, is to find that human connection and that interest in engaging.
And what we all need as a project team to do, and that it's our role, is the human element. The public consultation, the engagement is the human element. We're building homes for the people that we're engaging with. And Alex, it goes to your point, what can we ask residents' view on? And I honestly think that if they got consulted on almost anything, if it was how big do you think this balcony should be, I think that would be a start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because I asked that question not because I'm trying to, diverge the responsibility onto someone else. I've just asked the question because I just think it is an opportunity to actually create buy-in from people and to get people more involved.
I think Laurie Hancock said it really well, is that should be the fun part.
Yeah.
That's the interesting part. It's that chance to sit in the room and be real and talk something through, giving that feeling that they're dug into the questions.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm convinced there's better ways that we can be engaging rather than a community hall and we're all just standing there and people are reading boards and asking us questions, because the whole setup doesn't feel like we're encouraging their views. I worked on a scheme in Harlow and we did workshops with people and it was all sitting around a table, and it just creates a whole different atmosphere. It feels a lot more collaborative and you actually set out things that people can have a say in. It's very simple things in terms of what do you want this development to be called? And not just that, it could be, as I touched on, kind of the balcony sizes and internal layouts as well.
Yeah. Because there's a human element to somebody looking at a plan and saying, I'd live in that flat. Yeah. And you say, well, it doesn't have a balcony. And they're like, well, there's just an opportunity to let the process acknowledge the complexity of the subject matter. Yeah, those are my thoughts on sameness.
Again, it's just another opportunity to engage.
I think you alluded to this earlier, but do you think there's a sort of engagement missing at the strategic level? And not just in terms of development plans, but also, for example, at the spending review, where budgetary decisions about public house building were made, and some of these much more upstream in the process decisions are being made. To then, when it comes down to your local planning application, you think all of these much more strategic issues I would like to see happen at this particular site, but maybe that's just much too late in the process to address them.
It is. That's where the feedback loop, I almost think, needs to start at that very early stage. And the other thing is it needs to be closed as well, because residents that have actually actively come out and attended a consultation have no idea if anything they've said, any of their ideas has actually impacted the application. It goes back to trust, really. The biggest thing we need to fix really is we've got a trust crisis. Obviously, we've got a housing crisis, but I think the big thing is that we've got a crisis of trust, and that's across the board, because residents will point fingers at the council, they'll point fingers at the developers, they'll point fingers at us when we're in a community hall as well. So we need to address that issue, because addressing that issue will make everything else a lot easier, and it will also lead to better schemes, because if you can engage people at an early stage and get their views, it's a positive for everybody. And I've seen it all too often, is that we'll consult on large developments, and the people we've consulted are also inquiring to buy the home at the same time. So it's a whole process, and we need to work on that trust element.
I think that's a really, really interesting point about trust. And I think that we're probably stuck in a paradigm at the moment that's going to be hard to shift, and figuring out how to shift that paradigm is sort of the question of the moment, isn't it? There was this MRTPI survey that said there's actually a majority of MIMBYs, maybe in my backyards. What's to make of that, right? But it also tracks with sort of the pop culture perception that everybody says there is a housing crisis, there is an affordability crisis, there is a supply side constraint. And then when you talk to people about a development site near their home, they say, I could see it from my kitchen then. There's that just not here kind of mentality. How do you message around that?
It's a good question. It's a challenge. And some people I think you're never going to convince. But in a cycle, and again, I feel like I'm preaching this on this podcast, but the earlier you engage with people, the better, because they tend to go on a bit of a journey in the fact that if you start engaging them from the start, they feel like they're being listened to.
There's this really interesting parallel with this early engagement and the journey that you want to bring somebody on so they feel that they're heard and that they've added value with pre-applications. The thing that helps you do that is just the longer sort of duration of that engagement. Does everybody just want to be heard? Does everybody just want to be visible and to have that voice?
I would say yes, everybody does want to be heard, but it's how we reach everybody, because you can't reach everybody, because it's time, resource, money.
With sincerity to build trust.
Yes. So really what we need to get to the point where we are investing in that engagement process, both at council level and a developer level. That's when you get the opinions of a wider audience, and means that you can do more in terms of engagement and consultation. But
if we look at this at that strategic level again, what is the way forward? So we want trust, we want enfranchisement, we want voices. We try to end, or sort of draw to a close with each episode on a few kind of actionable concepts for the issues at hand. What would you have in mind?
So for me, I think there needs to be a reset, and I think that we need to do a national PR campaign really to explain planning. I think planning and development's not got a great image publicly, and I think that's the best starting point. And it needs to come from government, and it needs to come from local authorities, and it needs to come from developers. And I think to most people, planning is kind of a bit of a black box, really, and it's only until you see the bulldozers arrive and people then assume that this has all been stitched up and this decision has happened behind closed doors. And because that trust is just so low, and people have got such a mistrust in the process, but also because they don't properly understand why development's happening, they don't feel like they've been consulted. So there needs to be a national campaign to first explain planning and development and what it actually enables to people. And then I think people will be more interested in what's happening, and it would interest a younger audience as well. So that would be my big thing that I think needs happening. But again, this all costs money.
It all costs money. And I believe Cartwright has some capacity at the moment. And the GLA and the Mayor of London, his office does have a budget for this, right? They reach out, we're tackling this problem. We're doing this, Mayor of London. And I think that's fantastic. But I love the idea of a national campaign that focuses on the civic values of the society.
Yeah.
And is also honest about the negative externalities, right? Let's all toughen up and endure a little bit of construction dust.
Yeah.
because we're building a nation that will be successful next generation.
Yeah.
That's why all of this matters.
Yeah.
I think people actually do resonate with that.
I think it's that message as well that they can shape what's happening in the built environment. It's a strong message, and at the minute, if you walked out of the office here and asked anybody, do they think that they could have any influence, impact on the development across the road? They'll tell you absolutely not. If people feel like they can have a real meaningful say on a development, I think that will have a big impact.
I lived in Lambeth for a few years, and they said, look, our budget is going down. Do you want to lose the daycare for seniors or the ice rink?
Okay.
And putting that in real terms,
Yeah.
and giving people that direct connection. And if the government could say, is everybody okay paying £15 more a month above a certain income threshold, right? Because money matters a lot more to a lot of people. And I don't want to be insensitive to that. But I'll put it this way, like, would I pay £100 more a month and then have the comfort that the schools and the public services in my community are properly funded? Absolutely.
Yeah.
The money's here. Like, I don't have a checkbook, but who would I make the check out to? You know what I mean? And if we could have properly funded public services, then developers' viability would shift and they could just get on with it.
But that leaflet, I've not really heard of anything like that before, and that's brave. That's very brave, and I think
so ballsy. I loved it. I lived with another planner and then somebody who worked at Treasury, and I was like, oh my god, look at this. The other planner was like, ah. Yeah, it was great. It was great.
But it
was sad, but it was like a great tactic. Yeah. But personally, as a British citizen, I would have no problem with some of my tax revenue that I pay to HMRC going to building homes at a loss for the public interest.
I'd agree. I would completely agree. But it goes back to this national campaign. That would be a massively brave step for everybody to get behind, for the government to get behind. I think it's crying out for it. It really is. But if we can make that brave decision and take those steps, it would make the whole system a lot better. And also, I honestly do believe that it would reduce a lot more delays that we're seeing as well.
I think so. We see that on the decision-making level because we've been on schemes where the intended affordable housing offer started policy compliant, purest intentions. And then when the actual viability assessment is undertaken based on the scheme that's evolved through the course of the pre-applications, it's like, oh shit, right? And the weather changes when we tell the council because they just want the affordable housing. And when that can't be provided, then everything else is just sort of tinted with this shadow of like a resentment.
It's in the government's interest to hit these very, being blunt, very, very ambitious housing targets. It's in the government's interest to frame developers for it, in my opinion, for what they are as those enablers of infrastructure. They are essentially, we're leaning on them to deliver all these homes for people.
So to summarize, right? To summarize the ways forward, I suppose. So we had
a national
civic pride campaign, an education campaign about planning and the planning system, and encouraging people to get involved at all stages and levels of planning, from legislation to policy to planning applications.
Funding.
Yes.
Funding, big part.
Yeah.
Put your money where your exclusive right to develop is.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the early engagement. That's the biggest thing. The earlier you start, the better it is, the better the scheme ends up being. As you say, proper resourcing, engagement budgets. I'm obviously biased because that is my role, but I think engagement budgets and investment into skills, and not just on the private side, but also at a council side, is essential. Yeah, the national campaign is a big thing. It's that education piece that needs to take place with the public to really change the image of what I think planning is perceived publicly. Where we are in terms of the cycle, I think in Labour coming in with the new MPPF and the planning infrastructure bill, I think it's a real opportunity for a reset. That's what I would encourage Angela Rayner, which I'm assuming is also listening to this podcast. But that's what I would encourage.
I think she's another person to be at in every single episode. Ollie Sargent, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Ollie Sargent at Cartwright. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch, then we'd love to hear from you. Please write to us at podcast@centroplan.co.uk. Make Planning Make Sense is presented by Centro Planning Consultancy and recorded in beautiful London, England. Its executive producer is me, Aaron Zimmerman. Additional production by my colleague and co-host Alex Roth. Marketing and promotion by our colleague Reese Raymond. Graphic design by our colleague Mariam Malaksi. Music by Joseph McDade. From all of us here at Centro, thank you so much for listening.